Hello and welcome to our Museums for All informational webinar. My name is Helen Wexler, and on behalf of the Institute of Museum and Library Services, I'm pleased to welcome you to this webinar about one of our national initiatives, the Museums for All program. There are 3 speakers during today's session. In addition to myself, we will be hearing from Brendan Cartwright, who is the program manager at the Association of Children's Museums and the coordinator for this special initiative. And for a participating museum perspective, we will also hear from Ken Meifert, Vice President of Sponsorship and Development at the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. To set the stage for more detailed information that we'll be sharing about the program, I'd first like to present some general introductory information. Museums for All is a cooperative venture with the Association of Children's Museums with the goal of expanding access to the nation's museums by offering free or reduced admissions for EBT or electronic benefit transfer cardholders. EBT cards hold food assistance benefits. Over the past 10 years of this initiative, which started in 2014, IMLS has been working closely with ACM to recruit museums as program participants. One of the strengths of this nationally branded program is name recognition. Member museums know that they are part of a large nationwide effort. Policymakers are becoming familiar with the program, and visitors who might not otherwise be able to visit know that Museums for All participation means they will be welcome. Another strength is that access provided by this program is not limited to certain days or specific times. Museums for All participants are dedicated to providing access to everyone during their normal working hours, every day of every week. We began the program with a pilot for the Children's Museum community, but since then, participation has been open to all museums around the country. We're thrilled with how much the program has grown and flourished, and there's always room for more museums to participate. So I'll hand it over now to Brendan to present the initiative's guidelines.
All right, thank you, Helen. So the goal of Museums for All is to be easy for all museums to adopt and potentially to adapt. We have a set of broad minimum guidelines that make it an easy to use program, sort of ready out of the box. Those guidelines include offering a general admission rate of no more than $3 per person for up to 4 people when one individual displays a SNAP EBT card, and that can be from any state. This is an easy way to identify a visitor who qualifies as having a financial need in a minimally intrusive way. Museums have the freedom to decide what their admission price will be, free, $1 per person, $2 per person, etc. And are only obligated to offer that price for a basic general admission. If there are add-on attractions at your exhibits, you're not obligated to include those in your Museums for All offering. Although if you decide that you want to, again, that's where there's the potential to adapt it. You're welcome to if you'd like. The Museums for All rate would be offered during all normal operating hours. I mentioned about being able to adapt the offerings. For some museums, this includes accepting WIC or Medicaid or other forms of identification that they'll accept for the Museums for All price. It can include discounts on special exhibits or events, and some museums choose to offer a discounted membership. We've seen really massive success for this program so far. In the 10 years that it's been going, over 1,400 museums have begun participating. This includes museums in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the Virgin Islands. As Helen mentioned, we did pilot the program in children's museums, but now every type of museum is represented. We've got history museums, art museums, zoos, aquariums, multiple presidential libraries, and so on. And there's also another baseball Hall of Fame. The Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame participates in this as well. Anyway, museums in cities, in rural areas, large museums, small ones, all types. This was a little more interesting back before all 50 states had a participating museum, but it's a visual representation of states where museums are participating in Museums for All everywhere. And in case you're wondering how your particular region is doing, New England looks like it's lagging a little bit. There are over 30 sites that are counted under the single banner of Historic New England, though, for instance, so it's not quite as large of a gap. Many states are doing very well. California, New York, Florida, and Pennsylvania have the most participants, but Ohio, Texas, and Virginia have been growing very rapidly as well. As I mentioned, the Museums for All program was piloted in children's museums, which is one reason that we see a pretty large number of children's museums that participate, but we've seen quite a lot of enthusiasm in history museums and art museums as well. Some of these museums are free admission anyway, but they choose to participate to really drive home their commitment to extending the invitation to every member of their communities. And it's also a good way to get recognized if someone has gone to another participating museum and they see your free admission museum on museumsforall.org, they might be likely to visit you as well. As you can see, there's been steady growth over time. With our latest round of reporting, we're at over 10 million visitors that have used the Museums for All program to visit a museum. The visitor numbers took a little bit of a bump during the COVID shutdowns and the diminished capacities that museums were at, but people still use this program. And as you can see, the numbers have rebounded quite well. A similar program to Museums for All, which some of you may participate in, is Blue Star Museums, which gives free admission to military members and their families during the summer. And there are around 2,000 museums that participate in that. Museums for All, which runs year-round and is aimed at helping families with financial need, is at about 70% of that total, so doing pretty well there. One phenomenon that we've begun tracking are hubs, or cities that have 3 or more museums that participate in Museums for All. As you can see, many big cities that you might expect, like New York, Houston, and Chicago, are on here. But there are also places like Greenville, South Carolina, Missoula, Montana, and Springfield, Illinois. In a hub, museums can work together to really strengthen their Museums for All offerings. They can also recruit other museums to join, or at least demonstrate the benefit of joining. We've seen that in places like Richmond and San Antonio, Pueblo, and Grand Rapids. We'll talk a little bit more about hubs later. But for right now, we have 118 hubs. Although, as Ken mentioned, we might be missing Cooperstown on there. They do have 3 museums that participate. But I was being very technical and saying that 2 were sort of operated under one umbrella, so maybe it didn't count. And he said, I think it should. So, but either way, at least 118 hubs, 42 states plus Washington, D.C., all have at least one hub. And, this used to just be one slide, but we had to split the cities up over 2 so they'd be legible to read. So registering for Museums for All is very easy. We have a dedicated website, which is www.museumsforall.org with the number 4. And there's a button to register there. The actual process should probably take you less than 5 minutes, and it's free to do. We provide support materials like access to branded collateral, a dedicated group site, virtual hangouts, webinars like these, and more. We'll also send you a window cling to use at your site. And there's a searchable map on the website as well, and all the participating museums are listed there. Some of the other resources that we provide include previous webinars that have been archived, infographics that you can use on social media, press release templates, examples of every state EBT card, and staff training recommendations. We also have a profile dashboard of all the participating museums, and you can use that to sort of compare and contrast and separate them out by various filters to see what you might expect from similar types of museums if as you decide to participate in Museums for All. And we periodically create and add more resources. So don't be shy in telling us what you'd like to have. And we've created some resources specifically for those hubs that I mentioned as well. Some different sample press releases, template agendas, and slide decks for holding meetings as a collective. So now that you've gotten some of the background on Museums for All and gotten an idea of who's participating, what kind of support is offered, Helen will let you know about why participating in this program can be valuable to your museum.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm going to talk to you a bit more about the value of participating in Museums for All. So now that we've told you all about the guidelines and who is participating in the initiative, you're probably wondering, why should I join? Maybe you already have access programs. Most importantly, participation affirms that museums are meant for all members of their community and that they are committed to equitably expanding their community outreach. This effort typically fits easily within museums' missions, visions, and inclusion plans. Also, Museums for All is yet another way to increase community access to your research, your collections, your programs, and exhibitions, as it reduces all barriers. We make it as easy as possible by providing free customizable collateral such as press releases, templates, and branded opportunities to make it even more successful. Another benefit is the power of participation among multiple museums in a single city or region. Forming these hubs, as Brandon talked about, is allowing museums to market the program jointly and offer a menu of rich opportunities for families in their area. Museums and hubs are working together to build new partnerships with social service organizations and other community-based organizations, and to have a louder and unified voice when approaching municipal leadership or local funders for support. Here's a couple comments from visitors to participating museums that show the value of the program. The variety of individuals on food assistance is wide. While these quotes illustrate two examples, the nature of food insecurity varies from one community to the next. Museums in this program serve people who may have experienced a change in their life. Remember the pandemic? Either going on to food assistance in hard times or getting off of it due to better fortune. But be sure that all those served through Museums for All will remember that the museum was there for them when they needed it most. But a better way than reading quotes, we have with us a real live museum participant. So now I will turn it over to Ken Meifert from the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum to talk about his experience.
There, I'm unmuted. Thanks so much, Helen. Appreciate that. Let's go to the next slide. So for those of you who are not familiar with the National Baseball Hall of Fame, we are located in Cooperstown, New York, which is a rural community in upstate New York. Our population in the village of Cooperstown is about 1,800 year-round residents, and the museum welcomes about 250,000 visitors a year post-COVID. We opened in 1939, so this is celebrating our 85th anniversary this year. And the museum continues to thrive as a culture and spiritual home of our national pastime, and really evolving beyond our national pastime to really a global game at this point. So we're starting to see more international visitors as well. Next slide. So as museums, we're all focused on our mission. Our full mission statement is there on the slide, but we really sum this up in 6 simple words. We preserve history, we honor excellence, and we connect generations. Next slide. This is one of my favorite quotes about the museum. And this is a quote from a guy named Dr. Gerald Early. He's a history professor at Washington University. And this quote was actually used in Ken Burns' baseball series back in the 90s. Dr. Early was featured in 8 or 9 of Ken Burns' films, including Jazz and others. There are 3 things that America will be known for 2,000 years from now when they study this civilization: the Constitution, jazz music, and baseball. They're the 3 most beautiful things or design things this culture's ever produced. So just an amazing summation of why we still refer to baseball as our national pastime. Next slide. So what started in 1939 as a one-room museum has grown into a world-class museum with more than 60,000 square feet of exhibit space. As I mentioned, about 250,000 people visit each year from around the country and around the world. And Cooperstown has become a national brand that represents excellence. I can't think of another example where the museum's name, right? You can say he's going into the Hall of Fame or he's going to Cooperstown. So that the words are almost synonymous. Next slide. So why did we decide to participate in Museums for All? Accessibility. And I think first and foremost, Cooperstown, for any of you who have been here, is not an inexpensive place to get to. We're about 4.5 hours from New York City or 4.5 hours from Boston. This is an expensive vacation destination. Our normal admission is $30 for adults and $21 for juniors, which for us is age 7 to 12. Over age 12, you're paying the adult rate. So when we found out about the Museums for All program, we jumped on this because we really felt like the chances of a family, 2 adults and say 2 kids, 8 and 10, you're talking about somewhere north of $100 for them to get in the front door. And we really feel strongly about making this institution accessible to everyone and not just the folks who, have the extra cash or disposable income to drop to get in. So when we found out about the program, we reached out to 2 other museums in town, the Farmers Museum and the Fenimore Art Museum. And all 3 of us signed up at the same time and we joined in June 2022. And we offer 100% free admission through the Museums for All program. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about adapting the program in June 2022. We offer free admission with a valid SNAP or Sunbucks EBT card, which the Museums for All program, I think, added that to their suggested cards to allow free admission. And we've welcomed 5,671 visitors. This is as of September 30th of this year, since joining the program. And from a discount standpoint or revenue standpoint, we really believe that these are 5,671 people who would not have walked through our front door had it not been for the Museums for All program. So for us, it's a boost in attendance, and we don't believe that there's any loss in revenue by participating in this program. We only believe that it's making the museum more accessible to more people. We'll also say that as we saw these numbers start to grow, and we do not have a sponsor to cover the cost of the Museums for All program, but we designed another program to offer free field trips to schools within our region. And I'm talking about, cities like Syracuse and cities like Utica, who have very diverse populations and very high childhood poverty rates. And we were able to secure a sponsor for that program where the sponsor is paying for transportation, literally buses, buying these kids lunch while they're in town. They're participating in our educational programs. And so far this fall semester, we've welcomed more than 1,500 students and teachers to the museum who would have never otherwise been able to get here. So not only has, not only directly through the Museums for All program, but inspiring our team to come up with new ways to make the make the museum more accessible to audiences who couldn't otherwise visit. The program is prominently promoted on our Plan Your Visit page. And really all folks need to do is show up with their SNAP card and their ID, and they're in the museum in a snap, and hopefully they're having a great time. Next page. Whoop, I'm out of slides.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Ken.
You bet.
And as I alluded to earlier, and as you well know, and it's kind of a bummer to talk about, but here I am. Museums have been affected pretty greatly by COVID-19. Even now, some museums are operating at either a reduced capacity or maybe a changed operational system because of it. But in something of a surprise, we still saw about 8 museums a month continue to register for Museums for All during the height of the pandemic, even if they were closed at the time. We increased the number of participating museums during that main period by over 400, and it proves the continuing necessity of the program's mission. Unfortunately, that it was the case that some of the museums that were participating in Museums for All had to close permanently. But with one exception, every other museum kept their commitment to offering Museums for All rates to its visitors. And the one museum that stopped eventually started offering Museums for All rates again. So that was a pretty powerful testimony to me that in the time that that admission revenue was really at a premium, nobody dropped this program. And in fact, a couple compensated for their reduced capacities by offering their Museums for All rates to every visitor. There were operational changes that were made during the pandemic to ensure reduced capacities. Most museums required guests to buy their tickets online, or at least to pre-register. And a bunch of them have kept this system or something like it in place. It's a bit of a challenge to Museums for All visitors who merely had to show their SNAP EBT cards at the admissions desk before. So, when you're building out this new admission system, or if you're adding Museums for All to it, it's very important to keep in mind how your museum is still going to accommodate Museums for All visitors. So are you going to have an option at that ticket price on the menu? Will folks have to present their SNAP EBT card in person when they show up? Will you just direct Museums for All visitors to buy their tickets in person? There's not a right answer to it, but whatever your museum chooses, it should be explicit and easy to follow on your website so folks know how to get their tickets. And when you're allotting the tickets by time, make sure that there are enough for Museums for All visitors. On average, about 3.5% of a museum's attendance is coming from Museums for All visitors. That does vary by type of museum. It can be higher for children's museums, a little bit lower for art museums, for instance. One other thing that museums did during the pandemic, while they were closed or unable to welcome as many guests as they'd like, was to really increase their community outreach. And whether that was offering virtual museum tours and activities or distributing STEM kits to schools, the museums embraced their roles as community pillars, and they made active overtures towards their communities. And at its core, that's really what Museums for All is all about. Extending that active invitation to everyone, making sure they know that the museum is for them and that it wants them there. So museums recognize that access and inclusivity are important bedrock organizational values. And Museums for All is one way to help with DEAI efforts. So an organization's commitment to inclusivity usually extends beyond just Museums for All. And in fact, Museums for All works best when it's part of a suite of offerings. Many museums offer reduced admission for seniors, for children, perhaps educators or military. Many will offer some sort of monthly free day or even have free memberships that can be checked out of the library. All of those are wonderful, and Museums for All supplements them rather than taking the place of any of them. And while the only requirement to participate in Museums for All is to accept SNAP EBT cards, as I mentioned, several participants also accept WIC, possibly Medicaid. The Madison Children's Museum, for instance, has 21 different identifications that it will accept for their $1 admission fee. There are about 10% of the participating museums also offer some sort of reduced membership program as well. They're taking the next step of getting people in the door on daily admissions and then turning them into members with more solid museum going habits. Some of them are also using the opportunity to catch visitors that Museums for All might be letting fall through the cracks a little bit, such as foster families. And these museums are stepping up and supplementing Museums for All in other ways to try and catch as many of those families as possible. One part of joining Museums for All, and Ken kind of mentioned this, is broadening your visitor base. But another part is taking the time to work on assumptions and biases that exist within your own staff. So one participating museum that was located in a college town was surprised to see how many grad students were using Museums for All to visit. They hadn't expected that many to be on food assistance. And there are some wonderful resources around diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion on the AAM website. And the Cultural Competence Learning Institute, or CCLI, is another fantastic resource that for museums looking to improve their own approaches to inclusivity. One complaint that does come up is why people on SNAP assistance deserve this admission discount, or rather, why can't someone not on food assistance get the same rate? For our purposes, a cutoff had to exist somewhere. And we felt that a government issued card would work well and the least intrusively to demonstrate the need for some help in removing a financial barrier. But one of the reasons why we think Museums for All works best as part of a suite of options is so that those who don't have SNAP EBTs, some kind of appropriate price can be found for them. Helen, we'll turn things back over to you.
Thanks again, Brendan. Okay, so leveraging participation. Sometimes museums or their boards can be wary of joining Museums for All. They see that it calls for very deep admission discounts in some cases and worry that it will be a hit to their budget. We took a look to see if this is really the case. In 2018, we engaged Aurora Consulting to do an evaluation of Museums for All and the experiences that participating museums were having with the museum. The complete results of the evaluation are available on the website, but here are some pertinent findings. Most museums reported no change, but over a third of the respondents said they saw increases in ticket sales and attendance. 25% of museums saw increases in development revenue and membership and program sales. Only one of the museums that responded to the survey reported a decline in their revenue since implementing the program. Museums for All is a great opportunity to add new development streams, either soliciting funding that directly pays for the program or finding grants and sponsorships that will help. It's a program that helps an often underserved segment of the community, and there are foundations or banks or other local funders that want to be part of it. We're in the midst of wrapping up another evaluation because 2018 is longer ago than you think. So we'll see how things may have changed. The results of the evaluation will be available soon. One of the other things that we do with participants in Museums for All is that we connect them with other museums in their city or area that are also participating in Museums for All to form these hubs. And we don't call them hub cities anymore because, even though it says it on the slide, because we recognize that other regions or rural areas might have a group of museums that work together. We found that museums can better promote this program within their communities by working together. In December 2018, we invited representatives from 7 of these hubs, San Diego, Chicago, Akron, Missoula, Chattanooga, Worcester, and Grand Rapids, to attend a convening so we could determine how museums can work together to get the most out of Museums for All. We found that several opportunities for cooperation exist, and not just between museums. They can use Museums for All as an entry point to establish or deepen connections with local food banks or transit authorities in ways that help remove other barriers potential visitors face in making it to the museum. These actions build trust among community organizations and the people they serve. It shows that museums are serious about their commitment to having everyone visit, that the invitation being extended is real and genuine, and that museums are willing to put in the work on their end to make it happen. To complete the complete report from the Hub City convening is available on the Museums for All website. Then in 2022, we convened another group of hubs, including Richmond, Cincinnati, Providence, Tulsa, San Antonio, and San Diego. We wanted to know what better ways we could support them. Based on these sessions, we created some new resources specifically for hubs, including a special press release template, a flyer for distributing around the community, a one-pager to give to local SNAP offices, simple meeting agendas for recruiting other museums or potential partners, and a slide deck for use in those meetings. These are all available on the museum, for all museums in hub cities and regions to use. So if all this sounds intriguing to you, it's very easy and free to register for Museums for All at www.museums4all.org. We certainly hope the information shared today has interested you in becoming part of the Museums for All participation family. We'd love to have you join. If you have any questions after the webinar, please do not hesitate to contact us. Listed here are our email addresses for both Brendan and Ken and myself, and we are more than happy to answer questions you have about the program. You can also contact the general mailbox at info@museumsforall.org. That's with the letter 4 or the number 4. And we encourage you all to connect with all of the latest Museums for All news via Twitter at Museums4, F-O-R, all, just to be a little confusing. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Elizabeth, because it's time for question and answers. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll be posting the video recording along with slides and a transcript on the IMLS website at imls.gov/webinars. It should be available within a couple of days. All right, Elizabeth, take it away.
Thank you, Helen. Hi, I'm Elizabeth DeLeon Jones, and I work with Helen at IMLS. I am taking your questions today, and I see we have one question in already. Hi, it says, can you explain any more about how free museums can make the most of this initiative?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So, it always kind of seems to me that free museums should all really be participating in Museums for All, because it's kind of the easiest thing to do. There are some that, you're obviously not giving a discount on the admission, but, there are some who try to find other types of ways to do. They might give a discount in the museum shop, for instance. if there's a paid membership that they offer, they can do a discounted membership there. And it is also helpful, especially if you've got other museums in your city or area, to sort of be able to partner with them on Museums for All. I mentioned a little bit about how, if someone goes to another museum that participates in Museums for All and they see like, oh, this free museum is also in town and, is part of this. I know that like I had a great experience at this other museum that was involved in Museums for All. Let's go check this one out. So it's some nice marketing on your behalf as well. We do host hangouts, kind of informal hangouts, usually on a monthly basis. And we've discussed the role of free museums a couple of times on those. So we have the recordings from those hangout sessions as well that I'd be happy to share with you to get some more ideas. But that's kind of the gist of it. The one tricky part for a free museum participating comes when it's time to share an attendance reporting. We don't want to have you going out of your way to, ask your visitors if they're coming in with a SNAP EBT card or not. So for the free museums, we generally just get your total attendance and we get attendance reports on a quarterly basis. So for those 3 months, we just get your total attendance. If you happen to have discovered in some way that someone is coming specifically because of Museums for All, you're welcome to report it that way. But, otherwise we can just kind of track your total attendance over time. It's a lot more important to us that the visitors are feeling welcome and included and are able to come, rather than getting the most accurate count of who's coming why to the museum. So that is kind of a little nut with free museums that we haven't really cracked over the lifespan of this program, but it's also sort of secondary importance in the grand scheme of things. But hopefully that. Go ahead, Helen.
No, I was just going to add one other little thing, which is that families may not know that about your museum or know you're free. And a great part of the program is that it interacts with social service organizations and other community organizations who do serve those families. And often that's where they hear about the program, and that's where they hear there are amazing museum resources in their communities that will welcome them. So they're coming at you from a different way, and that's another reason to be part of the effort.
Thank you, Brendan and Helen. We have another question here. It says, at PacSci, we currently have access memberships instead of access tickets. Do you see benefits in getting museums to have both?
Actually, my supervisor is Kenny Sturgeon, who used to work at the Pacific Science Center, and she likes to tell the story of how, at the time they were weighing whether to get involved in Museums for All or to offer an access membership, and you guys chose the access membership route, but they kind of go hand in hand. Museums for All at its core is kind of set up to just be there for a daily admission, to make that easy. But a lot of museums, especially once they get started participating in it, they decide that they want to add on a membership component to it as well. And that's beneficial in a lot of ways, primarily in that it gets the visitor feeling a little bit even more involved and in the museum. One other really nice benefit of that is, they'll get a membership card, And so whatever kind of lingering stigma there might be with showing a SNAP EBT card, you can eliminate that by just, they get to show their museum membership card. So yeah, they really go hand in hand. I think the benefit of Museums for All is it allows the visitors to sort of, dip their toe in the water first, I guess. They don't have to jump all in on a membership. And the discounted memberships, we don't have a specific guidance on what those should cost. But sort of organically, the museums have largely landed in a $20 to $30 range for an annual membership for a family of four, with their reduced price. And that's a really good deal, for a membership. It may be a little bit more, like $30 might be more than a family wants to spend on that day. Maybe they just want to go visit the museum, and if it's $2 per person, they just have to spend $8 to go visit. So that's some of the benefits of the just strict baseline Museums for All program versus a membership, but they really go hand in hand, honestly. There are a few museums that have registered and they use a membership, a discounted membership rate rather than a discounted daily admission as their way of participating in Museums for All. So that can work in certain cases, but usually the ones that have a membership offering are doing that in concert with the daily admission as well.
Thank you. We have another question here. Other than reporting quarterly attendance figures, are there any other reporting expectations?
So those are the only expectations. We do have optional form or optional spaces on the reporting form. If you have gotten a sponsor, sort of like Ken mentioned, if you have created any new partnerships, with any other organizations in your community through Museums for All, we like to know about that. And one of the best ones is the sort of testimonials or comments. So any kind of feedback that you have, for us, that's not an attendance number, can go in that box. But that's usually where I get the really good stories of people that come in. And one of my favorites was of a father who came and brought his family to the museum and then realized that it was going to be a little too expensive. And they asked, do you have a SNAP EBT card? And he did, and he was able to, bring the family into the museum and enjoy it. And it just really highlighted to me, that the desire for people to visit the museums is there, like to the point where they'll take the risk of going to the museum without necessarily knowing that they can afford to go in once they get there. And if they're able to go that far, then I think it's a really great thing for the museum to say, okay, you've come this far, we're going to go the rest of the way to meet you and make sure that we can get you into our museum because you want to be here and we want you to be here too. So we're making that happen via Museums for All.
Thank you. There's a couple of similar questions. How can my museum make the best use of the program if we are not located in a hub city? And then another question, how do you recommend getting a hub started?
Well, I don't know, Ken, maybe this might be good for you to talk about since you were discussing with your the Farmers Museum and the Art Museum in town too. So.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we found out about the program and decided to enroll. And really, it was about picking up the phone and calling our colleagues at the other museums and saying, "Hey, we came across this great program. Um, would you like to participate with us? And we can do a joint announcement together." And they took a few days to think about it, and jumped right on board. So we started a hub with, one or two phone calls. But again, I think, for us and from every, before we actually signed up, I talked to a number of museums in upstate New York who were participating ahead of us. And everybody felt like these were new visitors that were walking through the front door. And as Helen mentioned, like no impact on budget, like there's no lost revenue. It's just more guests who otherwise wouldn't be coming through the front door. And I think when you approach it with that kind of attitude and you can share that with other museums in your community, this program becomes a real no-brainer, right? And it becomes something that that our staff and the rest of the leadership team here is really proud of our participation. And I think that's an important thing too, is a sense of pride that we're all doing this good work. And to make it accessible to people who otherwise couldn't walk through the front door, that makes you feel good every day. So, I think there's a lot of benefits, additional visitors and, that sense of pride in making the museum accessible. I think it's an easy conversation to have with other museums in your community, especially if you're on board. We convinced them before we were even on board. So, yeah, just sign up.
Yeah, sometimes it does take a champion on staff to really, get that decision pushed through for the higher ups. But, it's at the end of the day, it's a very mission-driven program as well. It's about expanding your outreach as a museum and really, you know, um, just helping your community all that much more.
And I will say that the Museum for All site is great. And being able to search by community and type a museum and that kind of thing, as both Helen and Brendan mentioned, like IMLS is pushing this out through social service organizations. And people are aware of this, right? And they're looking for stuff to do in their community or, in their region. So they may find you, on the Museums for All website, and come visit you, whether you're a free museum or not. They may not have known that. So great site.
What information is required in order to register a museum to participate?
Yeah, so that the registration form is there on the website as well, but it's really just some basic contact information. We ask how this will fit into your, overall outreach plan. And then, choosing what sort of level of admission you'd like to charge and letting us know which date you'd like to go live with it. And that's when we'll put you on the website. So there's really not very much information that we require from you. I guess it's also important to say that there's not any kind of expectations really on our end either. If you are not having anybody come through the door, like even if you're trying, you're making outreach and no one's coming, that's okay. It's there and if you're making the invitation, the other person does have to say yes. So it's a two-way thing. Even if you are, you just have the Museums for All logo on your website, but that's the extent of the outreach you do. It's just there in case someone wanders in with the snap card. That's okay. That's fine. It's one of those you get out of it what you put into it kind of things, but the important thing is that it's there. also, if there's not a time commitment to any of this either. So if you register, you're participating, and then for whatever reason, you're saying, okay, I think we don't want to do this anymore. You can just let me know. We'll probably ask you a couple questions in sort of like an exit interview thing, to sort of find out what wasn't working and how we can address that for other museums in the future. But just let me know and we'll take you off the website, and no hard feelings or anything. So but I also the vast majority of museums, once they get started, they're like Ken, basically. They're like, this is great, we like it. If this program were to stop tomorrow, I think the vast majority would still keep this in place and probably like it better because they wouldn't have to give me their quarterly reports. But it just is a very, good mission-driven, easy to use program, and pretty easy to explain to visitors as well. And the feedback that we get from museums is that the visitors are so happy to have this, and to enable them to come.
I think we have time for this last question. We have a few minutes. And it says, it was mentioned that visitors can be charged full add-on prices for special exhibitions or events. Is there a recommended approach for determining prices for these add-on exhibitions or events?
I don't have a recommended approach to it. It's a thing where, this program, it has to make sense for visitors, but it also has to make sense for the museums that are participating. So, I guess I would just say that, because it's like an add-on, it's going above the basic requirements that we have of you. It's not necessarily subject to the requirements. So, if you had a special exhibit that, charged more, you wouldn't necessarily have to cap that at $3. Like, you could give it some kind of discount, but it's not necessarily subject to the Museums for All basic guidelines. You can say like, we're charging you $10 for this one that normally costs 20 or something as part of your Museums for All package. They're not here, but I'm going to volunteer them anyways. The Cincinnati Museum Center is one that went from, just having their basic admission covered by Museums for All, and then they did add special exhibits under that umbrella as well. So I think checking in with them to sort of see how they did things, I would recommend that as well if you're interested in learning a bit more about that.
Sorry, I realized I was muted. I do not see any additional questions in the Q&A.
Well, then we will say thank you very much, and we truly, truly hope that you will consider signing up for Museums for All, and of course, contact us if you have any other questions that you think about later. And shameless plug, remember that IMLS funding opportunity deadline is coming up on November 15th. So if you have good project ideas, write up a proposal and send it our way.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and thank you, Ken, for helping us out on this.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you, Ken.